Well, I haven't had much sleep lately. My sleep patterns have been all foolbarred. But yesterday I actually went to Brooklyn for a presentation at the Avenue N Jewish Center, which is a synagogue, is its name. And holy cow, it was unbelievable how arduous the trip was there and back. When you look as far as the crow flies from my house to my destination, you think, it wouldn't take long. No, 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 no. Transportation is always a challenge in the New York area. Welcome everybody to the Critical Thinking Forum. Here are the room rules. We're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. Top of the hour, I will toss out my opening salvo, which hopefully will encourage you to participate. And if you wish to just raise your hand and come up onto the stage, you can wait until something is offered on the stage, which prompts you to want to join us up here. Or if you wish, based on the topic and anticipation, you can come up now as Steve, and welcome as well to Alan to the stage. Generally speaking, after people speak, they're removed from the stage to the audience. This is not punitive in nature, but only to make it possible for me to maintain the queue. I call people in the order in which I see them, which may not coincide with the order in which you see yourself on the stage. So if it appears I've skipped over you, just be patient. I always get to everybody who's on the stage. Since we are here from 5 to 6 p.m. New York time, at about 5 minutes to 6, we will no longer be inviting people onto the stage. But if at the 6 o'clock hour you are in queue, we will go into extra time to give everybody an opportunity to speak. Unlike many of the other rooms on Clubhouse, in the Critical Thinking Forum, we endeavor to speak one at a time and not to interrupt one another. And we treat each other with a degree of decorum and respect, even when we vehemently disagree. And for that, I thank you in advance. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. Welcome to the stage, Brent, with your pretty puppy on your screenshot there, your profile pic. We are less than a minute away from starting precisely at the top of the hour. Somebody else wants up here. Synergy and Rep John. There you go. Welcome.
Yeah, it's an interesting, before we all get started, interesting piece. I just called the little brother. Apparently there are no such cuts that Bella funding. He gave me a document to look at.
I think there are, and I will delineate that. But if you want to challenge that, feel free when it's your opportunity.
I think that's probably what I'm going to do, because he's been working on the big, beautiful bill for the better part of like 2 months.
This is not the big, beautiful bill. This is something that takes effect today. Okay, we're seconds away from the top of the hour. Welcome, Alan, to the stage as well. And John, who I think I welcomed before you got up here. We're now at the top of the hour. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. We are here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. And today's topic is the hurricane data and food bank cuts, good public policy. And you may wonder why, when the food bank cuts occurred some time ago, we are talking about that along with the hurricane data cuts, which take effect today. And I will tell you why. There was a story in the New York Times this morning that caught my attention, which said that as a result of those cuts, which I believe occurred in the spring sometime, I've got that data in front of me and I'll get to it in a second. But as a result of that, the food banks here in New York City are really hurting. They're not being able to meet the demand. And so I actually posted that to the chat, which is linked above, this morning. And I asked, maybe rhetorically, I'm wondering whether this affects other cities around the nation. And so that prompted me to do a little research today And the answer is yes, it is not unique to New York. So while we have one issue that is current, the other one is current in the sense that it is continuing. So let me, and I'm glad that Marshall jumped in there in advance because maybe there's a misconception. These cuts to the hurricane data information, they are Defense Department satellite data cuts. And they have absolutely nothing to do with the big, beautiful bill that is being voted on in the Senate today and was voted on earlier in the House of Representatives, which is something that we will obviously be getting into after the vote. But what the Trump administration did is they pulled the plug on the processing and distribution of microwave data. And this is a little technical, and I'm going to try to say it in non-technical terms because I don't even understand it from a technical standpoint. But from 3 satellites that are jointly operated by the Defense Department and NOAA. And the data includes these special sensor microwave imager sounder information. So basically what it does is that it peers through the clouds. So the issue is that at night, that's the only way they can really see like the eye of the storm. When the storm is well offshore, it's too far away for the hurricane hunting aircraft to fly into the center of it. And at night, otherwise you really can't see what is developing. So the whole idea is that if people are in the potential path of a hurricane, you want to give them as much reliable and advanced information as possible so that they can make the decisions with as much information as possible to be armed with on whether or not to evacuate or whatever decisions they think that they have to make. The earlier you start giving people information, which we know historically changes from hour to hour sometimes, much less day to day, but as much information as you can give them to give them an idea of what the potential strength of a storm may be is really paramount towards saving lives. So the experts are warning that there will be a degradation or degradation, I think is the proper word, of data as a result of this. Nighttime blind spots, and along with this lack of use of this data are layoffs among NOAA. So there are fewer people to analyze data than it was yesterday because this takes effect today. And by the way, it's not just, I didn't know this until I started researching this, the satellite information, but it's weather balloon information as well. They are reducing the number of weather balloon launches. Now, with regard to the food banks cuts, the USDA, under the president, canceled or paused more than $1 billion in funding across a number of food security initiatives. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, which sent truckloads of food to state and local warehouses, and the local food purchase and farm to school grants. Those supported school lunch, fresh produce via farmers. Those were cut as well, substantially. So, as I said early on here, what prompted this was the New York Times article, which was about the food banks in New York that are struggling. I decided to take a deeper dive into this. In Virginia, and these are just, I'm just going to list a handful of them. There are probably more, but you get the idea. In Virginia, the Blue Ridge Food area food bank lost nearly $1.5 million in funding. In New York, in Washington D.C., the capital area food bank had to cancel 670,000 meals. Nearly $3.5 million pulled from Massachusetts. Funding cut in half in the Hudson Valley of New York State. In Nevada, the Food Bank of Northern Nevada lost £1 million. This is how they're assessing it in meat and dairy. That bank serves 160,000 people, which is up 76% from before the pandemic. Houston lost 11 million. 60 fewer USDA tractor trailer loads monthly. 15% of the budget gone. More than 200 seniors no longer can get. What they're saying is 200 fewer seniors a month who got food from that food bank are getting it now. 1 million meals lost in Delaware, and in Tampa Bay, 20 million meals lost to the food bank. So, of course, the government has a response to all of this. NOAA is pushing back at those who are raising this issue. They are claiming that discounting the ingestion of the DoD microwave data is simply part of a standard process of data rotation and replacement. And they say that other satellites are providing microwave sensing. The experts say no. The reporting on the experts say no, but this is the government's position. And as is notable about the Trump administration, when there's a conflict such as that, it's the fault of the media. So NOAA is accusing the media of sensationalizing the issue and fueling unnecessary panic. As far as USDA programs, the USDA, I went to their website, they're describing the process as a rigorous line-by-line review. It's designed to remove spending that, according to their website, is, quote, contrary to the needs of ordinary working Americans, and programs that are tied to, quote, radical gender and climate ideologies. I frankly don't understand what that means, but the programs that were pulled, according to Ag Secretary Rollins, quote, no longer effectuate the goals of the agency. Okay, so, when we elect whoever it is the president, it doesn't matter who the president is, we expect that the president will have an administration, and that administration will effectuate programs that are necessary and designed for the benefit of society as a whole. So I guess there is a philosophical question here over whether the two programs to which we are referring today are truly beneficial to society as a whole. Is it costly to grab that data from the DoD satellites that are still up there generating the data and use it for hurricane weather predictions? Maybe it's too costly to be able to grab and analyze that data. And it's to the benefit, if this is good public policy, to pull the plug on that. I don't know. Nobody is saying that the satellites are dysfunctional now. So the data is still being generated. But maybe there's something there that I'm not seeing because I'm influenced by the news media that is sensationalizing this issue. I will just say, in fairness to my brethren, every story that I've seen on this, it's not quote, the news media, close quote, sensationalizing. It's the experts that they are interviewing, meteorologists, former NOAA employees, I guess, who are sensationalizing this. In fairness, if it is an exaggeration of the threat, blame the people who are being interviewed. And there are a number of experts, or in the case of those who disagree, so-called experts, who are saying that this could very potentially cost lives. Okay, the food bank, when you cut money to food banks, is it because the food banks are distributing food to people who are not eligible? And by cutting the money to those food banks, which are still struggling to stay in operation, have you changed the policies of the food banks? I'm reading the administration's explanation of both of these cuts. You heard them. You heard exactly what I've read. Frankly, I can't wrap my mind around the explanation. Maybe some of you can, and can expand on it in a way that makes sense of all this to people like me and others who are, quote, sensationalizing, close quote, the issue. So with that, we'll call people in the order in which we see them. And today that order begins with Marshall. Marshall? Marshall.
I am right here.
All right, come on.
Go, Marshall. Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is the proposed budget bill, not the big deal.
No, we are not.
No.
We are not. These are cuts with regard to the food banks that took place in the spring, and the data flow was cut off as of today from the satellites. Nothing to do with the big beautiful.
It's just to do with the Trump administration through OMB clawing back money.
I don't know whether it's through OMB. I don't know the process in which
it would be through the office.
Okay, but whatever, the clawing back money is accurate, I guess. I don't know whether money is clawed back with regard to the satellites, because they're still up there generating the data. Although they did lay off some people in NOAA, so presumably those were the people who were analyzing the data. Maybe we didn't need them, nor the data that they were analyzing. I can't imagine that that's a major cut to the budget. But anyway, yes.
I will tell you, having a younger brother who redid the NOAA NASA re-auth in 2018, reauthorization, he's not worried about it at all. Not even a little bit. And the only conclusion I can draw from that, since he's been on the Hill for 10 years, is that they're not making cuts in places that are like detrimental to NOAA's functioning. I would know OMB does have the power granted by Congress to claw back monies. They are not allowed to not distribute them. So they have to redistribute them at some point per the authorization language. But the Office of Management and Budget does have the ability to slow roll or claw back money.
And the premise of the questions they asked are not whether it is they are authorized to do this. The question is whether this is good public policy.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, look, I'm gonna go with my little brother on this one. He's not worried about it, so I'm not gonna be worried about it. I only say that because he's somebody who is intimately aware of the functioning of NOAA and NASA, since that was what he did for a whole year and a half of his life. So I'm going to lean more on the side of no, this is not as detrimental as we might think it is.
So how do you reconcile his analysis with that of the plethora of meteorologists and other experts who have come forward and said that this is potentially life-threatening?
That I am unsure how to pair together. I can only tell you what I know about him, which is he did the reauthorization. He's intimately familiar with the code for NASA and NOAA. And so the only thing I can figure from talking to him is he doesn't think that the cuts made during the spring are going to slow down critical functions, and that puts him at odds with those meteorologists.
Well, wait a minute. Maybe we're talking about two different things, because if he is analyzing cuts that occurred in the spring, and we're talking about cuts that occurred today, is it possible that to which you're referring and to which I am referring are two different things, or?
It's possible. I'll grant you that this is a little confusing for me. It being cuts and callback money, not bills. So it could be I was more trying to use your timeline than anything else, but his analysis does put him at odds with the meteorologists.
Yeah, I think there were cuts to NOAA that we've actually discussed before, and I think maybe the confusion is that you're referring to that, because this is something that is happening today.
Gary, I think that's what it is. Thank you for correcting the confusion.
Well, if you hadn't brought it up, other people who might be confused wouldn't know either. What about the food banks?
I mean, I don't think cutting food bank money is good policy. Granted, townships and states are supposed to take care of their own folks, but when the township can't keep up, in particular places like New York City or, say, like Houston or Dallas in Texas, those folks probably need federal funding. So that, I would argue, is not a good policy. But I will admit to being more confused about the NOAA and NASA than I think I actually have firmness on. But no, cutting food banks does not seem like good public policy to me.
I would hope that somebody might, somewhere along the line, do an explanation of why they're doing these things. But at any rate, thank you, Marshall.
Hey everybody, it's nice to see everybody. Did somebody kick John from the stage? I don't know if somebody did that, but
I doubt it. I don't think anybody gets kicked from the stage.
I got him a back channel that he was curious maybe.
Have him put his hand back up and we'll invite him in.
I think he got, I don't know. I think he got kicked from the room or something. I don't know. Alright, well, that's neither here nor there. Gary, I plead on the satellite data. I mean, to some degree, I'm woefully ignorant, right? I have to trust experts, and so I'm way out of my depth. But in general, I mean, I think there are certain things the federal government does that it does because states can't do them, right? We're probably better off with a federal tracking system for things to keep track of weather patterns rather than 50-state system. I mean, obviously. So, I mean, this is alarming if the experts that are complaining are right. I mean, it seems that we're endangering people, and I think in general, call me radical, but I think that's not a great policy to get people less lead-in time for severe weather patterns and things like that. And that just sounds really bad. But again, I mean, the government has answers for that. And I don't have enough information litigated out, but I mean, it sounds like something for concern. With regard to food banks, I mean, I think on some level I can see more of a philosophical argument for that, right? I think, look, the conservative argument tends to be, as Marshall said, right, that local folks should take care of their own, and that the further you get up the food chain, the worse things get. And that, I've heard conservatives say a lot of stuff like this too ought to just be done by churches, right? By religious nonprofits and things like this, by private sector charities and things like that. No, regarding churches, the average congregation is about 87 members and is not very fiscally, they're not rolling in dough to do all this stuff, right? So, I mean, and then states, right, are often have unequal sort of budgets. In fact, I mean, I was just reading something from Time that it's just interesting, right? The conservatives, the red states who often are saying, "Hey, government's not a great thing. Government is, big government's a big problem." They are happy taking subsidies that come from these godless, liberal blue states. So, I think that philosophically, though, you could argue that the federal government shouldn't be providing food for people, right? And that this is just something the federal government shouldn't do. You could make an argument, I suppose, if you're a small government conservative, that this was nowhere in the vision of the founders, or that we'd have a federal government that was doing food distribution. I would argue that times change, and sometimes we're 50 states, and sometimes we're one big collective agent, and sometimes we need the collective agent to actually come to the aid of folks in the various localities and particularities that need basic things like food. So, I'm with Marshall. I think in general, pragmatically, I just think it's a bad idea to cut food banks. I think it's very good money. It's also not very practical, right? You're actually delivering something that people need tangibly. And I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, Scott. I wanted to hold my own feet to the fire a little bit because, as I said, there have been a plethora of experts who have spoken out about the hurricane forecasting, and from several AP articles. I want to source 3 quotes very quickly. This is all these are all Associated Press interviews. Mark Alessi, who's a science fellow at the Union of Concerned Scientists, quoted by the Associated Press: "If a hurricane is a day away from making landfall, it's nighttime. We will no longer be able to say this storm is definitely undergoing rapid intensification." Mike Lowry, hurricane specialist. Other microwave data would be available, but only roughly half as much, which will severely impede and degrade hurricane forecasts affecting tens of millions of Americans. And the third example is Brian McNulty, quoted by the Associated Press. He's University of Miami hurricane researcher. Microwave data are all I don't know why I can't read today. Microwave data are already relatively sparse, but to abruptly end 3 active functioning satellites is insanity. That may be sensationalism, but in fairness, it's sensationalism promulgated by the experts. Why they always accuse the news media for doing its job when the news media reports things people don't want reported is something in all these years as being a reporter, I've never understood. Steve?
Yeah, Gary, let me go to the food bank thing first. As a general principle, I think that you're always going to have a segment of society that's going to be in need. I think you need to have some kind of way to take the edge off that if someone gets in a situation that they just can't empty themselves. But now, I'll preface that with this caveat. You can overload a system like that without controlling your borders. Like we've seen Marshall's state being completely overrun. That type of blow into the country can add a strain to those type of systems that it's never intended to withstand. So I think it's got to be two-pronged. You take care of the people that's in need. You do what you can to facilitate and make sure no one in this country is starving. But then again, you have to have some kind of flow on the control of the flow on the demand side of this. You can't inject a large demand with a budget that wasn't intended to do that. So the satellite thing, it's my understanding like you referenced that one article, when it gets within a day of the shore, that by that time ground-based radar can start picking up the
and hurricane hunters can fly.
right. So you're not blind. I think that's a little hyperbole.
But when they're too far offshore, they can't
But that's
fly.
not a day, Gary. That's not a day out, like the guy was trying to say. And if you're one day out off the coast, you know, ground-based radar and hurricane hunters can reach that. You're talking more deep in the ocean. And, you know, as someone that lived in a state in proximity to the coast for a number of years and went through quite a few hurricanes, let me tell you, as someone that's been through numerous hurricanes, I don't care if it's 120 mile an hour or 140 mile an hour wind. I'm going to get myself prepared. So, are we talking about the exact number on how many millibars of pressure drop we got? Or are we talking about wind speed? But for someone that's actually lived in a place that was prone to hurricanes, listen, I don't care if it's a Cat 2, Cat 3, and we had one come in on us that was Cat 4. You know, if you live in that area, you don't have to. It's not going to change your preparation for someone to say, "Oh my God, you got a Cat 4 instead of a Cat 3." I mean, you're going to be doing the same things because the effects, even though there's going to be varying degrees of intensity, the preparation and effects are going to be very similar. So I think we may be talking about a nuance here, and you know, maybe if you want to be able to get the exact millibar drop, or you want to get the eye wall strength or the intensity, you know, those things could be at play. But people who live in those areas, when they see that stuff coming in on them, if you live there any time at all, you know what you got to do. So I'll leave it there.
By the way, you might miss this when I read it. So he didn't say a day away. He said a day away from making landfall, and it's nighttime. So,
I didn't think nighttime would affect ground-based radar, would it?
it's not the ground-based radar that they use primarily. It's the hurricane hunters who cannot fly into the eye of the storm.
But it's my understanding when you get in that, you know, if you're a day away and you say you got a storm, I think ground-based radar a day away could reach in and give you sufficient data to tell you whether you got a Cat 3 or Cat 4. But again, if anyone that's ever lived where you get a lot of hurricanes, and we're like 70 miles off the coast, so we got a little cushion from the land, but we got plenty of them. You know, regardless whether it's Cat 3 or Cat 4, you're going to be preparing the same way. People that know will be preparing the same way.
I would say not. And to give you the best example that I know, and I live at the coast, and I also have probably lived through, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes, because I was one of those idiots who got sent into the path of the hurricane to report on them as a national correspondent. So I was there before the hurricane arrived. I was on the radio telling people they should be evacuating. I was, you know, I never had a problem finding a place to stay because everybody else was leaving. I managed to get through, obviously, all of them okay. But if you look at Katrina, which I covered, that was a massive freaking hurricane. Massive. And we know the amount of damage that Katrina created. And we knew it was a massive hurricane long before it arrived. Like at least a week, maybe more. And it gave everybody the opportunity, whether they availed themselves of the opportunity or not, because we know that FEMA ended up dropping the ball, to not only evacuate if they had the ability to do so, which folks folks that didn't have the ability to do so, the local government didn't provide them that ability. They could have. But the point was, they were given advance warning long before the hurricane made landfall, and they could have, should have, would have taken the proper precautions. And I'm not just talking about the individuals. I'm talking about utilities. I'm talking about people who could help with evacuations. I'm talking about pre-positioning emergency response after the hurricane arrives. They knew how many. They should have known. They dropped the ball, but because of that.
Our family are not food insecure, and Womack, he put an excellent point in the chat. Like, I may not drive a lot, but you may need to drive a lot. I'm paying taxes for the roads.
State and federal dropped the ball on that. The various, mainly church-based, but not all church-based. The Red Cross was in there as well, for example. But all of these disaster relief programs, they had all their people in place in advance. And I remember being there for Katrina, seeing the Baptists roll in, the Salvation Army roll in, the Red Cross roll in, and thinking, where the hell is FEMA? Where the hell is FEMA? But the point is, Steve, they all had that advance information, so they knew to gear up. People knew to give their bosses notice. Hey, I got to take time off to go down there and volunteer on this hurricane that's coming in. It's mad, and everybody looked at the TV and they saw it. It was huge. I think the ability to pre-warn with that kind of specificity, based on the interviews that I've heard with the meteorologists, is going to be diminished tremendously. And how, and what are we saving by not analyzing the data? What's the gain by doing that, Steve?
Well, I'll just say this in relation to what you was talking about there. One of the things I was always acutely aware of during hurricane season in the area that I lived in, because there's some flooding areas, was the topography around me. I mean, that's just common sense. And the people in New Orleans, knowing that they're sitting there below sea level, knowing that you got a Cat 4, I think it was Cat 4 coming in on you, people like that didn't evacuate, I don't know what to tell them, because that's just crazy land. And if you're in that type of situation, and like I say, topography is important because you get massive amounts of rain off hurricanes. If you don't have some acumen into what your topography is, and have some awareness of that as an individual, shame on you, because you're not doing your job as someone trying to look out for your family. And you should take precautions. I didn't need. We had I forget which one it was. I think it was in 87, 88. I can't remember this. So many came in when I lived in southern North Carolina. I lose track of it. But, when you'd see these things, you'd start thinking, okay, where am I at? What's the chance of flooding? What do I need? What do I need to have a plan? I didn't rely on the government there. I mean, I know they can be some assistance, but I think if you're not acutely aware of these things, you do a disservice to yourself. If you think government's going to save you in that situation, hold on, because you may be in trouble.
There's a really good joke Ron White tells about hurricanes. He's a comedian. And it goes about people staying behind during hurricanes. And he goes, there's this guy on South Beach who said that he did 1,000 sit-ups until he was prepared for the hurricane. Well, brother, it's not that the wind is a-blowing, it's what the wind is a-blowing. And if you get hit by a Volvo in your spleen, it doesn't matter how many sit-ups you did that day. I hope that adds a little levity. I think the joke is very funny.
So here's the thing about New Orleans. it was actually a Category 5 over the Gulf of Mexico. It was a
Yeah, I
category,
can't remember which one it was.
yeah, but it was a Category 3 when it made landfall. And this was a water event more than it was a wind event in New Orleans. There was a wind event too, but it was the flooding that caused the most death and destruction.
Yeah, but carry on.
In the ninth ward of New Orleans, which was the hardest hit ward, it's a 34% poverty level in the ninth ward. Point being, the people, I spent time on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. People on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, by and large, although there are poor folks there too, had the means to get out of Dodge. There were a lot of people in New Orleans that did not have the means to get out of Dodge. They didn't have transportation. They didn't have money to purchase transportation. I recall seeing a yard full of school buses.
No, I was thinking the exact same thing, Gary.
And they were flooded out. The school buses were flooded out because, well, nobody thought to evacuate the damn school buses. You could have taken those school buses and used those school buses to evacuate people to higher ground and save the school buses. Two wins with one shot. But they didn't.
But you know something, Gary? You know who primarily was responsible for the safety of their citizens there? It was the governor and the mayor.
I said the local state. I said the local, state, and federal level. I said all three failed. But I was there, and I know where the failings were, and I know on all three levels there was failure, and I know on all three levels they were pointing at the other two. I was there. I covered it. I remember all that. But the point is not how Katrina was responded to by government. The point was they had the information in hand that they should have responded in a better way than they did. Whether it's follow the governor or the mayor or Michael Brown who headed FEMA, it doesn't really matter. They all dropped the ball. They all dropped the ball. But Gary, the next time we have a Katrina, and if the degree of the data is such that they cannot predict with the kind of accuracy they did the intensity of the storm, well, we won't be able to blame them for not doing their job because they didn't have the information at hand. So it's great for them. They don't have to do their.
No, I'd say this. I'd say that conventional radar could give you an indication of how severe something's going to be as far as the rain, wind speed. I think you're talking about very minute details within the forecasting, and the bigger picture of what's coming at you. You know, if you get a Cat 3 or you get a Cat 4, and you know you're going to get a lot of rain off this thing, you always do off hurricanes, and you know you're in a low-lying area, topography-wise. I mean, you don't need precision there. You just need a little common sense. Hey, it's time to get out of a place that's going to turn into a pond and call it good. But I'll leave it there.
Steve?
All right, so just a few comments. One, Marshall, I love hearing about your brother, but
Probably should
congressional.
so much.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying, like, I think we might be overreading, how much to kind of buy into what a congressional staffer thinks. Because I understand it's your brother, but congressional staffers, as somebody who's dealt with some congressional staffers, they typically have huge portfolios, and they don't really understand the workings of the executive. I mean, they're typically kids out of college with no campaign staff, whatever. So I would just kind of state that just to kind of think about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. As far as this data, New York Times did some really interesting reporting on cuts in NHA are essentially health studies. And what they essentially came to is they kind of looked at all the grants and studies they were cutting at universities, and they, figured out they're kind of doing a control find and looking for works that they don't like. Diversity. They cut a bunch of grants out of a pool of money where the researcher was, just disabled or whatever in studying, whatever. It's haphazard. They cut science. It's very bad. My thesis on this hurricane data is essentially the same thing. There's somewhere where the satellite's going to kind of collect climate data, is going to track it over time, and that's super bad for this administration. And that's why they did, what Marshall was talking about, Big Beautiful Bill, that's budgeting. This is essentially OMB cutting the rug on this data collection. It was terrible public policy, and this is why. Steve talked a lot about how you don't need a lot of data, and you don't need all this nuance and all this stuff to save lives. And that's all you can do. If you go back to the 1900 Great Galveston hurricane, it killed around 12,000 people. Why did it kill around 12,000 people? Because nobody knew what was coming. And it just hit them out of the blue. We have made great strides in hurricane prevention, and it actually does matter a hell of a lot how accurate those paths are, because as somebody who has also lived in a hurricane area, you kind of get fatigued from evacuating. And people stop evacuating. Every time a hurricane comes up, you tell them the world's going to end, it's going to hit you directly. The more accurate these paths are, the more data you can share with people exactly who's in danger and exactly who should evacuate. And as far as a life-saving measure, we don't know the bounty that the modern world has given, because we are in a world in which we have it so good, but we're tearing down. We're essentially tearing down what has given us that life-saving data, and it's a shame. And all because, and my thesis would be, they're going to dare collect some data that might support that the global climate is changing. I think it's short-sighted, and I think it's down and down.
By the way, nobody is, as far as I can tell, has argued that, or publicly estimated how much the government expects to save by shutting off the processing of the microwave sensors. I can cite how much is saved as a result of NOAA forecasting, which is not just the microwave sensors that are no longer going to be analyzed, but overall. I'm looking at a news article that cites a 2024 American Meteorological Society study that estimates that for every $1 invested in NOAA forecasts, $73 are saved. And I see another analysis here that says that advancements in predicting wind speeds, which rely on data that includes microwave observations, not exclusively, have generated about $5 billion in savings per hurricane. Now, I'm just reading the top of this analysis. I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's just, I don't have time to read it. You don't want to hear me read it. But just suffice to say, there are great savings to be made to insurance payoffs potentially, to lives potentially. I don't see a justification for doing this. I don't see how saving any money by doing this.
Well, just to add to that, you know, this sort of science subsidized is the sort of lifestyle people all come to expect on the coast. This, along with federal flood insurance, is why you can have the built-up areas in Florida and don't, you know, have a Galveston, Texas every few years. And to just kind of rip it down and say the nuances don't matter, it doesn't matter that you know, the meteorologist can tell you if a storm's going to hit Tampa or going to hit the Panhandle. That stuff matters a great deal in getting people out of danger. The accuracy of those tracks, the accuracy of those wind speeds, help cities like Tampa know when to evacuate and how to evacuate and how much to evacuate. And it's just the fight of stupidity to just tear this down because of a big boogeyman that I suspect is climate change.
Well, that may or may not be the motivation for it. That's an interesting proposition. Thank you, Brent. Alan, you're up.
Good. How are you this evening, Gary?
I'm good. Sorry I didn't give you a heads up, but
That's okay.
You already noticed it. So
I'm going to answer your question, then I have two small points of order, if you will indulge me. First of all, the answer on the weather thing is absolutely terrible public policy. I can't agree with Steve. I think there is, if the government doesn't do it, who else is going to do it? There's no excuse. It's just plain dumb. And it may well be about global warming, but whether it is or isn't, I'm with you. I see no justification. Now, I'm in California. We have earthquakes. If we were talking about predicting earthquakes, I could imagine an argument that says we don't currently have that facility. Why should we invest in it? But since this is already here, why are we taking it away? It makes absolutely no sense. Now, I am going to, so I disagree with Steve on that one, but I am going to agree with Steve. And some who think of me as a progressive may be surprised, but I actually think there is a justification to the food bank reduction, and Scott covered it a little bit. We want to talk about what good people we are, and you know, Biden used to say we are great because we're good. Well, Anson often says, and I think with great justification, that government can only do what people are willing to pay for it to do. These people on the right, particularly religious people, want to be all gung-ho about abortion, and yet they don't want to take responsibility for the life that's created. And I would say this is the same thing, that maybe it does make sense for government to say there is a limit to what we can provide in terms of food, and we are going to leave this to the religious communities and see if we really are good. Let's throw that challenge open. And to some extent, I really blame George W. for this problem, because his idea of compassionate conservatism was really taking a charter away from something that had been typically in religious communities. Now, I do want to mention that my brain trust this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern is going to talk about the Great Divide. We are recording this room, Gary, and I would love to know from you why, you know, Scott had a terrific thing on St. Augustine the other day, and I was frustrated that I couldn't go back and listen to it. Why have you chosen not to record your
well, it's for personal reasons that I don't really want to get into right now. But
Okay.
I'll tell you on a phone call if you really.
I'd love to know, and yes, I would love to. So yes, let's do that sometime.
So it's interesting when you said this. You made this comment about the philosophy of the government ought not to do it, but you know, the churches will do it. But the churches apparently don't step up enough. Some of them do, but not enough, and they can't do it on their own apparently. And the food banks are like the churches, I guess, right? And well, it means nothing, but what, just give you an example of a fellow I know who absolutely believed exactly what you articulated. This is not the job of government. This is the job of the churches. That's how it used to be before, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that's how it should be today. This is stupid. I don't want my tax dollars being used to help people who are too lazy to go out and get a job. That was his philosophy. I'm not saying it's yours. I'm saying that was his. That was all well and good until the guy who ran his own little business and he became ill and he fell onto hard times and no longer could provide for himself. Guess where he went to for help? He's in subsidized housing.
Yep.
And they deliver him his food. He's all of the things that he railed against when he was making money. And by the way, he was making a lot of money at one time. There was some overhead to his business, so a lot that went in went back out. But he was bringing in a lot of revenue at one time. And then things went sour in his business, and then his health got bad. And it wasn't for lack of fortitude on his part. It was not for a lack of him not having those strong Protestant Christian values of rolling up your sleeves and working tilling the fields from dawn to dusk. He was of that ilk, and he had such strong disdain. I remember pulling up to a food cart with him. I was in his car. And he says, "Hey, there's this great food cart." Yeah. So he pulled up, and there was a guy outside the food cart begging for money. And he looked at me and says, "Get a job, Pops." Well, guess what? He's now that guy. And so you got to have a safety net, I think, because not everybody's going to be able to get out of Dodge when the hurricane comes, or be able to grow food in their backyard if they even have a backyard, and and then can it and save it for the winter and all that kind of stuff. We're not that kind of a society any longer.
Yeah,
and people don't have those skills,
But Gary, I want to push back on that for a second. This food and medicine are different than education. Education is about the future. It's about how our children are going to have a society tomorrow. But medicine and food, when do you stop? When do you say there's enough quality? And there's this conflation between what is individual responsibility and what is government responsibility. And so I'm not necessarily believing exactly what I'm saying. I'm not this cruel, but I'm saying if Anson is right, that it's more important to have guns than butter. Let's just put it that way for a brief thing. Maybe the thing that Donald Trump has done for us is forced us not to take such things for granted, and maybe people need to, in the short run, experience a little bit of seeing people starving and so forth before they recognize the great things we have.
Wow, interesting. And by the way, we're at 5:55, so we won't add anybody to the stage, but everybody on the stage will get an opportunity to speak.
Hey Gary, happy Monday. I don't have a lot to add. I did want to maybe just say I did put some information in the chat on food banks and specifically the largest food bank network in the United States. It's called Feeding America. I put some information in there. It has raised about $4.9 billion. Has a 4-star charity rating for 10 years in a row. On its board of directors are, I think, the vice chairman of Walmart, vice chairman of Morgan Stanley, Fortune 100 type people, all supporting food safety here in the United States.
Feeding America takes $0 from the federal government. It's 100% privately funded. And it does partner with SNAP and other USDA programs. So I just wanted to put a word out there in support of the kind of work that is being done, Gary. Long Island, where I live, has a food bank established in 1980 by former singer Harry Chapin. I don't know if you remember him, Gary.
Of course.
Okay, so Harry started the food bank, and I have been lucky enough to have founded a food pantry, which is aligned with the food bank. They provide us with the distributed food. All of these organizations are privately funded.
All the ones that to which you refer.
To which I refer, and I know of, which includes other communities on Long Island and whatnot, food pantries. Run by, in my case, local citizens who volunteer, sit on a board of directors, that hand out bags of food on every Tuesday afternoon. And do that kind of work. Do that kind of community work. So I just want to put a word out there for those guys who do that kind of work all across the country, who are privately funded and have been doing so. Well, it doesn't say 1980. Yeah, well, that would be like 45 years. A long time. So there's a lot of work that's being done. The government, USDA, and SNAP or programs that the federal government funds. But this other work is equally important, and I want to make a point there.
Thank you, Dominic. So when I was in Detroit, I participated as a grunt in the Meals on Wheels program, delivering food to shut-in seniors in Detroit. And I never thought about who funded it. So as you were talking, I looked it up. So that particular program receives about 35% of its funding from the Federal Older Americans Act Nutrition Program that's administered through the state. But it goes from the federal government to the state and then down to the Meals on Wheels program, and then the meals get loaded up into my car and I deliver it to the old folks' homes when I was there. So I have no idea whether the spring, I've not been in touch with those folks in decades. I don't even know who those folks are now running these programs today. But it would be instructive to me to find out whether their ability to service the senior community in Detroit has been diminished by the spring cut. I mean, this is the thing. It's always the damnation is in the details. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of things. And
I would just make the quick point.
I would just to complete my point first, Dominic, I would be very upset based on my personal biased history because of my alliance with that program if I heard that, of course, those folks that I was delivering meals to are no longer around. But the ones who are now, who were younger then, obviously, I would be very upset if I learned that the Detroit Meals on Wheels program, to which I was a part, was no longer able to feed as many senior citizens as it did then. I can't see how anybody could say that those people could fend for themselves, nor that we should turn our backs on them. But go ahead.
I was just going to make this distinction between prepared meals, which is what you were talking about. which is completely distinct from food banks and food pantries. So I just
You're talking about Meals on Wheels, right?
the devil's in the details.
Yes.
No, I just want to make sure it's correct.
You're welcome. I'm gonna check further to see whether the program that funds Detroit, the Older Americans Act nutrition program, was cut to. So, like I say, we're getting into the nitty-gritty agent here.
Sorry about that. How are you, Gary? It's good to be here.
Well, now that I'm able to put a complete sentence together without stumbling, I'm doing fine. A little earlier, not so good.
It's good to be with you. I'm not an expert on these cuts that are happening, but I'll tell you my insight. The food bank thing, I don't know enough about it. I volunteered at some food banks. I'm not quite sure how important the federal funding for food, that seems pretty high level. And, I know they talk about food deserts and so forth, and I think there's a big problem with the nutrition, and I know Robert Kennedy's trying to address, us not poisoning ourselves with sugar and chemicals and hormones and all kinds of things, but, I don't have, no one's dying for lack of calories at the moment in the United States. But on this hurricane data thing is interesting. I saw a headline the other day about AI being used to do weather prediction now. And this is, I think, being pioneered by some of the big tech companies. And if we're talking about cuts to federal funding for infrastructure or analyses or personnel or so forth to do with weather, data gathering and analysis, I have to wonder for a second. It's like, how many satellites in near Earth orbit now do we have? I think it's in the tens of thousands maybe, or it's at least in the thousands that, for instance, just SpaceX has in orbit. Amazon has a new program. They almost hired me for putting the same types of satellites in orbit. Lots of other companies are running satellites. So my point is, I think early days when the cost of capital and the cost of the profit and when there's a clear public good argument for some programs, it makes sense for the federal government to be, the provider to make these like tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in investment to get a new technology off the ground and to provide that public good to everyone. But I think once the cost gets low enough that it almost just falls out. In a sense, weather data is almost just like an artifact of some of the other data that I know all these tens of thousands of satellites are already gathering. And all you have to do is connect that data, which a lot of the big tech companies are doing on their own anyway, because they have profit motive to know about, for their own machinations, to be able to predict the future, to be able to predict the weather, and therefore to maximize their own profits. My point is, I think we're well past the era that we need to rely on the federal government to gather and analyze this data, and actually private players are doing it in a much more sophisticated way already, and in many cases just giving it away to us for free. It's like nothing for them. And so, like, the path of the hurricane, we're not in the 1940s anymore. We're in the 2020s, and we have the technology that's practically ubiquitous is so much more powerful. And I, therefore, am skeptical of bureaucracies that may have been created in the 1940s to solve these types of problems, and whether or not they're actually providing the maximum value to the taxpayer in 2025. And certainly in 2030, I'll be very surprised if we still need them for this specific thing. There are other things you can make arguments for, but I'm not too worried that I won't know
when the hurricane's going to hit or something like this. I think we've got that solved in a much more sophisticated way than we ever did.
Again, I question that why are all these meteorologists and scientists arguing otherwise? But the answer to your question is 19,000.
But do they have a financial incentive to say that?
What would the financial incentive be?
If they're a meteorologist who's getting one way or another getting federal money into their pockets.
Yeah, but that's not exactly that, and that'd be wrong. I said my other brother's not too concerned about that, at least from his vantage point. But NOAA does serve an important purpose, and having to get it from a private source means, number one, they don't have the exact same resources at their disposal. But number two, it's going to have a subscription fee. NOAA has no subscription fee, and keeping NOAA as the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service is good for us. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't, Jackson, not right now. I'm not saying you can't make cuts in government programs. I am saying I don't think the idea of simplifying it down to let's just do it private is a very good idea. The private sector is not going to share that stuff unless there's some sort of a profit motive. And you need weather data for the military that doesn't have anything to do with profit motive. Granted, they have their own weather service, but they do use NOAA as one to take off of. So, while I understand where you're coming from, the Department of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service does do invaluable work for the U.S. government and saves us a lot of money in subscriptions every year.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Agent. It's 19,000. 11,400 of them are still active. The other 7,000 plus are space junk. But 19,000, I don't know. At a certain point, that's a problem as well. They have to, when they do space launches, I think they have to take all that into consideration now. David.
You should Google the word Kessler syndrome.
Okay. I will. I'm interested in that. David.
Yeah, great discussion. I think the title is another title that really doesn't really need to be answered in a way that I think it's obvious that this isn't good policy. Considering the level of global warming that's going on, climate change, the impact on lives, the ability of the American people to respond, making decisions based upon how soon do we evacuate, how much damage is going to happen. I think there's a whole host of things that the government provides that can be monetized on behalf of the taxpayer, and just basic good safety policy. We talked in the room about the FAA and air traffic controllers. I mean, it's just good policy to have seasoned, experienced people manning the ship, manning the air flights, without any downtime, without any question, without any private sector gap filling that may not have the same incentive to do the job that the seasoned professionals and government workers have. The food bank issue, to me, I mean, we're talking about the dance between church and government and the public-private sector. Well, there's one religion that I know of that's done a phenomenal job of backstopping these kinds of things, and that's the Latter-day Saints, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, also known as the Mormons. They have a massive network of bishop storehouses, farm to table, farm to warehouse. They've got reserves. When Katrina happened, they deployed hundreds of volunteers and food and whatnot to the sites faster than I think FEMA was providing it at the time. If we recall the confusion and all the stuff that was happening there with regard to delivery, and we had George W. telling Brown he was doing a great job when he really wasn't. But the Mormons learned from the Great Depression, and they've also learned from a history of being
outcasted by the United States government, which forced them in the state of Utah. But they also teach a level of self-reliance in the bishop storehouses, which is what they're called. When people go there for food, they put a program in place to get people back to work. They figure out what their budgets are. If there's elderly involved, they make sure they're fed. But this is an organization, Gary, that doesn't want to leave anything to chance, whereby they're at the beck and call of the United States government to serve their members' needs and their members' families' needs. So, again, I'm not doing a plug for them, and I'm not trying to promote their religion at all, but they have been exemplary in their history of how they see the most beneficial aspects of taking care of their congregation. And of course, if all hell in a handbasket breaks loose, the other thing they used to teach was that every member should have a year's supply of storage in their houses and the basements to be ready for any situation that could happen where you may not be able to feed your family. So I think there's a level of self-reliance there that I think the nation can learn from. But that being said, there's still a massive amount of poverty in this country, housing insecurity, food insecurity. It breaks my heart to see our government debate, whether or not children should receive school lunches and vouchers. Where we have the restaurant industry, restaurant industry throwing away billions of dollars of food every year because they have to, because of state and local laws regarding perishable items. So there's a whole host of waste there that I think we could capture somehow and be less wasteful on that front. And then, of course, with regard to the folks that pick our food, the farm workers, the great state of California, where I live, where half of all farm workers, or close to it, are undocumented, oils in the orchards and the mines and the ground and so forth. So how much is that going to cost the nation? So
you're saying in the aggregate, the food insecurity problem is now being compounded?
That's my argument, absolutely. I would say that very accurately. It's going to be compounded. Not just compounded, but also higher prices being raised. So a family of four going to the grocery store, does the mother cut back on fresh produce that might be going up in cost because it's too expensive in lieu of something more processed and all that? So there's also the health of the nation that can be impacted by these rising costs in terms of feeding your family with the best possible produce out there, food out there. And then, of course, I think if you can feed people and keep them fed, you're going to cut down on medical costs because their health isn't going to decline, right? If you got to go out and eat fast food at $5-10 a pop just to not starve, well, that's the worst food on the planet you can put inside your body. So what does that do to the health of the nation and its workforce and whatnot? So, those are my thoughts, Gary, on that front. So yeah, no, we should not get rid of that. Yeah.
Thank you, David Lesson.
So I learned a lot by listening to folks before me, and some of what I'm going to say has been said before. Very important is, in terms of hurricanes, is the ratio of false reports. Telling people to go evacuate versus correctly versus non-correctly. And the more you get it right, the more people listen to you. It's the same way with anything, right? If I give you advice and it turns out to be good, people are gonna listen to me. Versus if I am wrong too much of the time, calling fire when there isn't really one. And that's where data comes in. And we need to be able to improve knowing where this thing's going to land. And we have the computer power now to do that, but we also need data to go into it where we can predict better who should be evacuating and who should not.
So I've always said, Les, having covered, like I said, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes. I guess I'd have to go back and try to remember them all, but a lot of hurricanes. I've come to the conclusion, and obviously this is not something to be taken literal, that hurricanes have a mind of their own. So you can predict landfall is going to be at a certain location, and then it's like the hurricane's listening to these news reports and saying, well, I'm going to fool you. A second banks into a different direction and makes landfall elsewhere. And so it's really kind of inexact. So I think actually your point is that we need more data, not less. And I think that what I just explained lends credibility to your.
Well, yes, and weather used to be more capricious, and then we had better modeling of the weather, and now I am just shocked I can get the hour by hour prediction of what the weather's going to be, and I can have a 10-day forecast that is accurate. And the technology can help there. In terms of the food banks, I would like to, I should say one more thing about hurricanes. And that is, I recall Brian Williams became famous for his coverage of Katrina, but it was all very, how horrible the people there were. He was in this, the population was acting like savages or something like, he was in this, what was it, this,
The Superdome?
Superdome, thank you. And his reporting there, when you look back on it, was terrible.
Well, I can't comment on his reporting because I was down there and I had no access to television. I was sleeping on the tarmac of Louis Armstrong Airport. I had no idea what my colleagues were reporting, but it was a bad situation.
Right, it was a bad situation, but wasn't because people were, just going into the law of the jungle, which is the kind of stuff he was putting
I think
out.
some of that did happen. I think there was very little security, no policing. There were a lot of New Orleans cops who did not report for duty. They evacuated. So there was a shortage of cops. It was really an extremely chaotic situation. I can't even begin to describe to you how chaotic it was in both the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, where I was, and in New Orleans, which I was there for 3 weeks. So I'm very familiar with the. There were no landmarks in some cases. No street signs. It was unbelievable.
And he was just reporting on speculations that turned out not to be true.
I'll have to go back and see that because I did not hear that information was inaccurate, but it might have been. But go ahead on the food bank.
And I'd just like to say, in terms of food bank, out here, well, I think a lot of places, a place called the Second Harvest, and it's the idea of gleaning. You have food that, they take off the shelves for one reason or another. It's still good, but maybe there's too much of this for the demand or whatever. And also the government used to subsidize the prices of some commodity, and then that food was distributed to these food banks as well. And the companies do it because they're nice, but some folks also do it, and this is not bad, but there are, the government subsidizes it by having tax write-offs. So it is costing taxpayers in the sense that somebody's got to it goes in, it either increases the deficit, so either you got to pay more taxes now to make up for it, or your children will have to pay it in the future. And that's not a bad system, but I'm just saying that we are, the government is paying for it in the sense that these companies aren't paying what they would normally pay for all the government services. They don't have to pay the same tax rate that they would have paid without the write-off.
So Les, I'm looking right now with regard to the Superdome, and it's really ironic because, as I said, I was there, but I was never in the Superdome. So I was unaware of whether the reporting was accurate or inaccurate. You're absolutely right that it was inaccurate. It's all been debunked subsequently. There were two investigations, one by the New York Times and a review by the LA Times, that found that the more sensational claims were unfounded. There were no sexual assaults, but sexual assaults were reported. There were no gun battles, but gun battles were reported. There were no multiple homicides. In fact, only one verified death, but that guy committed suicide by jumping from an upper level. There were problems there, a lot of problems. It was overcrowded. There were 30,000 people there. The heating system went down. The medical supplies were limited, and the number of people there to help the people were limited. But this exaggeration of how people were treating one another while huddled in the Superdome, and I did not know until today that was untrue. So I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. That's really extremely.
Yeah, so I was surprised too. And as you know, Brian Williams was disgraced for making crap up for a different story.
Right, he was on a military airplane that flew into enemy fire or something like that.
Right. And
I've never understood why a guy who reaches that stature. I mean, I've never understood the exaggeration by reporters to put themselves, make them. This is why you're not supposed to be part of it. You're not supposed to be the story. You're supposed to be reporting the story. You're not supposed to be the story. And it's not about you. Even if that plane came under fire, it's not about you being so brave and to have gone through that. The story is that this is what our military has to endure. It's not about Brian Williams. At any rate, I know some people do that. We're all human, and you're going to have frailties among journalists as well. But once you reach a certain stature, why would you do that unless you've been doing it all along that it becomes just second nature to you to do it? That's absolutely stupid what he did. But he's not the only one. I mean, we know that Hillary Clinton lied about her and her daughter coming under fire on the tarmac of a military base once and stuff like that. And Joe Biden embellished a little minor fire in his house in Delaware. And these embellishments erode public confidence in journalism and in government. And by the way, not all of the misrepresentation of what occurred in New Orleans came from the minds of the journalists. A lot of that it came from the mouths of the New Orleans officials into the ears of the journalists. So there's that.
Well, I want to tell you, you asked, why did Brian Williams do this starting when he was, big guy? And as we just saw, that's how he became a big guy. He made up sensational stories that got him on the air. And also, he looked like an anchor.
Right, yeah, he was typecast very well. Look, I know a guy, I'm not going to say his name, he's still in the business, but he did a story where a guy, he was reporting, and by the way, it's accurate that this was happening in Detroit at the time. that people in public would be shooting up during the heroin craze. I've seen it myself driving down the street. I've seen people on street corners shooting up in public view. They're so whacked out they don't care where they are while they're shooting up. I've actually recently seen it, meaning in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, somebody had his works out and was shooting up in a subway station in Midtown Manhattan. It happens. But what this guy did, he ended up paying these guys to shoot up on camera for him. He paid them. He paid them to shoot up on camera. And when the story came out, I think he even won an award for going into the gang-infested neighborhood of Detroit and bravely, with his crew, capturing this. And then it came out that he had paid and he got discredited. But guess what? He didn't lose his job. And in fact, he went on to bigger and better things. I would never hire a guy like that. Never. Well, you're done, as far as I'm concerned, for doing that. So I know it happens, and it shouldn't happen, but it does on occasion. I was unaware of Brian Williams reporting at all. I mean, I was there, and he was there, but I'm sure he was unaware of my reporting as well. Thank you, Les. Brian, and then Bam gets the last word. Brian.
Hey, Gary. Bottom line, I think both of them are necessary programs. And here's what convinced me. First of all, what everybody, I think so far from what I heard, is getting wrong about the weather information. And I think you did touch on it, is it's microwave information. And this microwave information is the same kind of microwave that we have in our microwave ovens. And they can't just get this anywhere. This is coming from the Department of Defense. And what this does is it measures the water in these storms. So, when you were talking about, I forgot what they're called, surprise morning storms or something you were mentioning, that detects the amount of water and whether that storm is going to blow up, whether it's it might come in a certain category and then blow up to a higher, it measures, basically it just measures the water in the storms, and that type of information is unique that they were getting it from the Department of Defense. The articles I read didn't mention any other alternatives to that. I mean, there may be out there. I don't know of them if there is, but it did led me to believe that information they were getting from the Department of Defense was unique. And the Trump administration is citing cybersecurity reasons for not giving it out to the NOA anymore, and also budget and layoffs. The food bank, at first I was like, there's all kinds of food banks. There's food stamps, I don't know, not sure what the big deal is on that, but I did some reading up on it, and there's two main programs, and forgive me because I forgot the name of them, that are canceled. And what they're actually not only are food banks, but they provide healthy food and meat and vegetables to schools for school lunches. And this program is twofold. Not only does it provide it to the banks and to the schools, but it also buys it from local farmers. So you're providing these farmers a market for their food, and providing them a job and income, and the food is going to a good place. And you really hate to see that type of food not go to the schools, for our children. A lot of children, they don't get a good meal at home, and that's one reason that the schools, the school districts try to provide them a good meal. And you really hate to see this stream of food not be provided to our children, and let alone people that need it. And another reason the food bank part was important is that I was reading that food stamps, although you might qualify, they don't provide you enough you might fall short by the end of the month or something, or you may not be able to find or buy the. I didn't quite understand that, but you might not be able to buy the same kind of food that you get from the food bank. Fills in the gaps, so to speak. So there is a purpose for it, and I do have. Know some folks that do receive the SNAP program, and I do, they live in a different state, but I do recall them saying that they go to the church food banks, sometimes because they either need something that they couldn't buy because they ran out by the end of the month or whatever. But I think that all of these things are good, and what really upsets me is we're not. That I'm saying, they want to cut the deficit, but they're taking away these valuable things that help people, but yet give tax breaks to the rich, and it's just not a balanced way to do things. And
I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the first most expensive thing in the federal ledger is in fact social programs. 3 of them: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Well, I don't know why you and the government want to call Social Security a social program when people pay into that all their lives that they work. And the rich people, they stop paying out of their income at a certain rate. So rich people really get a pass once they get over a certain amount. It's not a social program. It's a pension that we've paid into all of our lives, been taken out of our check, not even voluntarily.
Yes, and if we don't figure out a way to solve it, it's going to run out of luck.
Well, that don't make it a social program, and it pisses me off when people call it one. It's not freaking welfare. It's not welfare. It's not welfare.
You are arguing against what the president who put this in place was. He argued that it was a social welfare program in 32. That was what he argued. If you don't like
how in the hell can it be a social program when it was taken out of my income all my life and paid into that program? That's a pension. That's not a welfare program. I'm not going out there handing for handouts. I don't care what anybody call it. It's not a social program. You don't pay out of your pocket all your life for a social program.
It's defined as a social program in government.
Well, it's wrong.
Not just government speak, but in law. Well,
it's wrong.
You think it's wrong. You think it's wrong.
So when I get my pension from work, that's a so when I retire from work, I'm getting a social program from work. That's bullshit. You don't know. They may call it that, but it's not true.
Private sector pension plans, that's fine.
It's the exact same thing. I paid into it, and the money compounds. And the Social Security would be there if Congressmen had got their ass in there and started robbing from it.
Well, here's the point. The point is, Marshall said there are 3 areas that are the highest expenditure of government money. But the distinction that I think Brian is making is that Social Security is not government money. It's not tax money. It's the person's money that he or she put into the system. It's not tax money.
I don't disagree with you. But okay, I will argue that the Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and the Senate have disagreed. No. They've brought the trust fund to the tune of about $4 trillion over about a decade. And their excuse for it is that it's intergovernmental borrowing. So you can rob Peter to pay Paul and make Social Security go bankrupt in 2034 because Dick Armey and someone else like Nancy Pelosi, I'm only referencing her because she was speaker for a long time, ended up doing that, right? They robbed us to the tune of about $4 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is 4 World Trade Centers built entirely out of $100 bills. That's what $1 trillion is. And we've been spending right. My point, Brian, is that regardless of what you think, those social programs, as defined by FDR, we call them social programs, they eat up the first line in federal expenditures. The next one is the interest on our debt. The third one is the military. And the fourth one is everything else we spend.
But anyway, what does that have to do with what we were talking about in the first place, though, which was the food bank and the weather?
You got off on
Not sure how you got off on that.
I got there by noting that when you're talking about the government cutting money, that it would make sense that the government would look at the largest line item to cut.
Well, these really aren't. Comparatively, though, what we're talking about today are not very big line items, really. Not much that the DOGE cut was really large items.
Well, especially with regard to the satellites. Those are Department of Defense satellites. They're not going to deactivate them. So the satellites are still gathering whatever information they are gathering, not just weather information, I suspect, but who knows. They're not going to deactivate it. And I bet you, dollars to donuts, the microwave information is still being analyzed because they need to know for troop movement and to where to put our ships safely based on hurricanes. So I bet it's not like they're going to turn a blind eye to the information up there. They're just not going to make it available to NOAA to make it available to the general public. So if I'm correct in my assumption, and I acknowledge what I just stated was an assumption, then why do you do it? Why do you do it? What gain is there? The other things that this administration has done, the cuts that they've made, they make an argument that people may agree with. Some people may disagree with their argument on why to do it. I still don't see the reason why they want to cut information that could save property and lives. Why? And I don't think anybody has been able to explain that, even those who took to the stage to say that it was
cybersecurity and budget.
I don't understand the cybersecurity issue.
Then what do you mean by budget?
No, well, the saving money.
I don't think there was. They never even said how. They've never said how the money would be saved. They never said how much money would be saved. So you could say all you want. I'm doing this because it saves money. That doesn't make it so. So if in fact it's saving money, then is it not incumbent upon the government to explain to me, who lives along the coast, why they are trying to where they're saving money, how much money is being saved, so that I have an understanding of why they make my life at greater risk today than it was yesterday, literally.
Right.
That's what I have to read on the federal directive for OMB on why they collect the money in the first place.
It would require the government answering that question. You don't think this question?
What I was going to say was, I'm fairly certain in order to get an answer, you would have to submit a FOIA. I don't think you get an answer out of the Trump administration without submitting a FOIA.
Well, whether submitting a FOIA would be successful or not is not the issue. The issue is, why have they not explained this to the American people? The only answer they say is that the news media are sensationalizing the issue. That's their answer.
Readily explain stuff. It didn't readily explain stuff under Bill Clinton, and neither George W. Bush, neither Obama.
Well, we're not talking about Bill Clinton.
No. My point is, there are lots of administrations that don't provide that kind of rationale. It's rather important.
Well, we're not talking about those administrations today, and we won't be talking about the Trump administration. The next generation of chief executives. We'll be talking about that generation of chief executives. I guarantee you that if this forum is still alive, I will make this pledge. You can write this down and throw it in my face, that if the next president of the United States is a Democrat, and people come up to the stage when we are critiquing that Democratic governor, that Democratic president, and say, but Trump did that, I'm going to shut him up. I don't care what Clinton did, because that has nothing to do with our discussion at hand. If Clinton did something, no, it doesn't. So two wrongs make a right?
No. I didn't say two wrongs make a right. I said it's the normal way the presidency is followed.
Define normal. So if it's normal, we shouldn't critique it, because it's normal.
No, I think critiquing normal things is a good idea.
Oh, okay. Then why did you bring it up in the first place?
Why did I bring it up with Brian in the first place? I felt like it was important to make the distinction when talking about cutting money that one of the places one should look is the top expenditure in the federal budget, regardless of whether we like what that means or not. I don't.
So let me answer your question. Let me answer the question based on the philosophy that you're trying to articulate and see if this holds water or if I'm totally misunderstanding your point of view. So if under President Trump, he authorizes the extrajudicial killing of an American citizen on foreign land at the hands of our military, and that is criticized. The response to that criticism should be, well, Obama did it, so it's normal. So that just shuts up all criticism of current presidents. For sure, if we're going to do that with all of the transgressions by this president, the subsequent presidents are indemnified from criticism. Indemnified, because anything a future president does, well, at least it's not Trump. Look what Trump did. Look what Trump did.
We're indemnified, Gary. I simply think it's important to point out that the Trump administration is not unique in the way they're exercising this. That probably the better criticism is that this is the way the system is functioning as a whole, and it's unhealthy overall. But it is normal. It's a normal that we should have, but it is normal. My point in saying that is the presidents, every president, references in legal opinions the person who was president before them.
But I'm not a president. But I'm not a president, and I'm not a president. Neither are you. So okay, name one program that Bill Clinton cut without explaining to the American people why that program was cut. Name one.
Medicare. He argued that he cut about 50%, but all he really did was cut about 50% of 1% of spending.
And did he cut Medicare, and he did not explain why he cut Medicare?
He cut Medicare, and he didn't explain properly how he cut it.
Oh, properly. But he did offer an explanation.
He cut it and made it sound like that he was cutting 50% of something.
But he gave but he did give an explanation. He was disingenuous.
Explanation.
And so what was his explanation? Not for the amount, but for why he cut Medicare.
Getting in line with Gingrich, but this is my childhood, so I can.
Okay, but you brought up Clinton, not me. So that's why I'm asking you, Clinton. So he did give an explanation. It may not have been a satisfactory explanation, but he did give an explanation, right?
Sure, Gary, but if we analyze the Clinton presidency, I'm absolutely 100% positive we can find areas in which Clinton did not explain things to the American public. I don't mistake my position for being one I want, because it's not. I don't want the world to be like that. The world is like that.
I know, but Marshall, we cannot critique a current president under the cloud of what we critique a current president. Marshall's going to say, well, this is normal because so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so did it.
It doesn't mean it doesn't perform, Gary.
Then why do you bring it up? What's the purpose of bringing it up?
The Trump administration is often lifted up as an example of a president that is unlike any other president.
Nobody has said that today in the course of this discussion. So why do you bring it up then? Nobody said that. Nobody said that only Donald Trump has done something like this. Maybe they think it, but nobody has said it. Nobody's articulated.
Because the emphasis has been on the Trump administration.
Because the Trump administration is the administration in power and making the decisions.
I don't disagree. Decisions are not simply in a vacuum.
they are able to use their predecessor's reasoning for what they do. If I had my way and I could wave a magic wand, I would tell you that it's normal, but that it needs to stop right now.
So are you going to bring this up every time there's a critique of the president that previous presidents did things?
If it is one in which I feel like we're focusing in on the administration to the detriment of previous administrations' tone setting, sure. I don't feel like I need to bring that up every time. But if we are using the Trump administration as an exemplar of things that are not going right or should not be done, it does help to know whether that was behavior that happened to the presidency previously or whether it was not. You can then take that behavior, even if it's normal, and say, guys, this has been considered normal for quite a long time. It shouldn't be. We need to do something different.
I don't see how it advances the conversation with specifically on the topic at hand by doing this. That's like saying if my neighbor is a criminal and did something that's heinous, and we're discussing it. Well, yeah, but this guy did something too, and the other one did something too. We're not talking about what the other person did. We're talking about what this
Jerry, it's not about that. It's about the use of power. If it wasn't objected to under 3 or 4 different presidencies, then why are we objecting to it now?
Now we get to the heart of the matter. Now we get to the heart of the matter. What is the use of us critiquing the current president if what the current president does is normal? Maybe I'll make that the subject of tomorrow's discussion. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
مرحبا بكم. إذا فرسي نمشي؟
أنا تقريبا سوري إني ساعات بين مسلمي لكن تكون يسار يزن.
أوكي. يساركم.
مرحبا. قاعدوا من هذا الزمان مهران.
سوري يساركم أنا اللي سوري
لحد دي. ما عندي صار هاون بكده فيه. ماني نيرو تسعن هذا داير قبل كده ولا أبكال سيد أبكال سيد بوليتيكا وطلقة لا داينر إذا طلقوا بعد ما جروا شات فوري ما لك تزنو بلا قدرسي مسوات الخفيلو عوض من 5 سنة زي كوينس الناس عنو تلقوا بلا الجيري صمان اليوم النبي قام كيتقنن لي نتانا يكتران شو عدتنا عام الزنبرة زي تسكت انتي تسكفر مثل باي كل صوت وموسى أنا بسياسة so منتي نايكزي أو تعملنا دينا كنا أنتو هي ترى سوانيرو بشكل زماني تكادك عطوا حسين اليوم هيك دام كم تنقالوا هوت نايت خبابينا نايوكين وروكين خول زماني كن مسوس قوقينا كم تزغر مكان نقرات زعبا تمن ستموني هذا نقر كبيرنا تسحيي لك مسارحيتا هذا يعني كم مساعد بطو ولا تزرع على ملفك اسمه حيني منستنا نايبا حكيت كم زي كالعادة الناس الحجين نور على كرنا أفريقيا كم ما نسير على الناس اللي سمعنا نتناتنا نكوه درس السنة أبايد أزول السنة هذا زي نفسنا استعنا اسمنا نقرر أفلبنا ننفح سنة كان يوم سكتين that's why تضطر نقرر يجتاين مبالي تمام تسجن خدمة لبينا يزوي سمري يرداي مسوس قوي نوه جزء وقال سكتين ذهب ومرتين مساعدات كوزا حتى كده كدي ما دلا إذا كوزا مساعدة دقائق ما روان إفرا أي مدلة مسكين جزء ما كدفع كل ساعة عني وتدربي وأنا بجرشة طوعة خطر إذا كل شيء تدربي وموقع عني مستزحل فوسا يجوز الدوم هذا واحد نتوم إحنا بعد خلص سنة زبالة بس أنا يسمى حاجة جرنا أنا بحكي نترنا بدينا نعمل إذا أخذ اليوم حتى زنورتنا يوم ما هراي الله بركاته thank you Ibuana
¿Cómo cada efecto de un movimiento? ¿Efecto de losa?
الله خير يمين عافية ما مثلا
أنا ما كان عندي مثل
نحن دي
عجمتي خاف أنا حدش حمام نجامير ويخاف ديسكونكت خانا صغيرين مسلم كنا كونكت ثانية بزغنا أنت عطي تبط نفس مليس كادون اللي خان تسفلت أبان إشتين تايكو سورة لي مستاتور ورا أبد ما بيلو زاربات نبلا تسفلت حدا تنكي اللي يكون النبي ويكون تسفلت نحرر لهم الزيغات تعلم نايت غزاون نايت خون يكون هجراوي ميدياتات تكونون هجراوي شافات تبرد كله قومات نقول له كل تكالات يتراو هجراوي تكالات سي علامون تاي ندحرينا نتتغاغي تنها نمرامي وي نمبراهي شكر تراهي وزول حجي كردو غي تنها زيغا ويقول أنصار مسمر حيل تنها زيغا حتى تكلعب نقول قبول كاي ولا تخلون حتى تتكلم عليه ولا لا يكون السوق حتى تتلعبوا تلعوا حرق بزوجه زي ردوا كم تصيروا له ولا مليون زي تحت تسلمي تسلم ترى وزلوا كمهر إنسانها كسبق إنسانها عقراوي له كمية سنيعو ብዙ ስራሕ ከዓይ ፀኒሑ ትብሎ ወይ እውን ኣብቲ ሃገራዊ መስርሑ ፀኒሑ ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ኤርትራውነትን ኤርትራን ፖለቲካ ናይ ኤርትራን ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ቃልሲ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ እቲ መስርሕ ክሓልፉ ፀንሐ ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ እንግርግር ክብል ጥራይ ደይኮንስ ክትፅይቅ ክትሪኦ ከለካ ይሸጋሪ እቲ ናይ ካልእ መረዳእታ ዝፀንሖ ሰብ እንግርግር ክህልዎ ንቡር እዩ ማስኑ ንቡር እያ ነዝቕበሎ ኣብኡ ቅሬታ የለዎን مستقبل مثلا عمي كاتزلون علي وسيخة عقل وسيخة مرداتها كعبد عيد للنبل من تايز حدث كهما كلهم خما عينات زيجا وكلهم يقول سجن رحيم هذا لنا عبد مسرح تاني حزب السامي سجن ندعو الناس خيتون ما تي سرحت قعي تاني حزب السامي سيكن ندعو الناس خيتون هذه أجدا سجن الفتاة لنا تسفي مليون فتون تحدد نسناي ولا تحمل منكم وأنت تكون ديردو ولا نداولكم تدقاقم وطريد الله من تقبل لي أنا تسكت تسلت سنحكا ويقول حرق رقصنا لك تسنحكا يخبوا أقل مسمر تسنح أنت بقي قرر أنت تكون عرى لبونا أبيك مسمر مسنح سلزي ترداكاي وسلزي تقبل كاي تقبلها تصنح كاي تشبه كوين النازل لعل سكاخت مدلو تصنح كاي سلم كوين النازل سمعت كتكاكي ونينكا أنكيكي كتقولون قدات مسوكي تساقم رفيق أنا مزوم من خطر بيتشون تساقم يبلين أبيكا بوليتيكا مردات تصنحون تساقم يبلين لو كيد ليني لو حتى تصنح سب تساقم يبلين مش كله تساقم يبلين ذاته أنا توزي أطول ناتهم مردات مرقات الكيتون بصنحهم يجي تسفيه دايق بالدليل نقرأ مقدي تتحدى تسرازي العلم ما نمسل مثلا لك سلامن ده نعاخا فرداكا تصنحنات كارية عالم كانت سلا تصنح قنبول غاي صراحة جينا بتحد مسمر كتمت تغلقا مسناي سكفتها كم تغلع له تصنح لازم استقرايت لنا خمتاسي مسناي سكفتها ناينا مخدو قنبول كاي سكف سد قنبول كاي سك حدد قنبول كاي سك تاراتا نمن تاي تتاراتا رقاتو له سبيل زي نتصرن كادلين تسفيقون كالوت كلاتكم أبزن تحرانو سلامتاي أيتوتو كيما سلطغالي حيتوتو مرداتكم أنا ترى بكم حيتوتو أما تقولوا تسأل حسبيو ولا ظلوا كبر زيت ليو نقرأت كزارب نتي مسرح كزرق ولا الدبل زلو سبيو أنا شكر بين الناس زي أخذ نتصدر يعني هو إيرترا فيرست سو أنتو يتبوت إني عمل إسكا سكتات هذا اللوسي نزغون سكن من دس قرباتي
رمكان زتبكو أكال هران تبوتنا توني خاصة عن تلاي مسا تي كان نقر دايم فلكا تي قداي بتسألها هزبي تي إذا كذا استغفطوا لكم نتلك كان لازم كان أخذكم من رداي نتي كسر حجي شغل تبعينه سبحان ربي فلطي نابلكا بزح سبب بيجا مقد خير كقلة سايسنا حجبن تنا إرتراوي شانلات النامزها تحكتات كقلة أو حجراو مسمر سبكنات سخطو يخلها ونمر حجزين ونمر نقرأ وانيفو تي تخونت حمكت بتم هجراو يعني سنيح وتيخا ديم زراب معرنة هذا بروباغندا ديم هرام تخمت أصل السنحنا تخمت تعمينه كل سبوتي بصرح أقل ميتوزي حجي من تحديد كان ويقولي كان سبب ويقول كان أنا لا نسا ولا سمانية جزء حدد ولا سبعة جزء نحتقين كان خالد فلو صام اللي شاتولو بر بتتسأل صوتي قبل الإيرتراويان أبجيد عمر رسمه وخدو عبيت من قصات نحامسيتو كسع معسكرات تسريح له نعم بدنا نقار تجرا أنا ويروح تزاريبو نسوي بداية هنا تخدد ما يتسرح مسقط خير بدأك دي أنا نرسي حجنا دي تبغى زارب تبين سني خمس جزء عمود كله سني أفتكر تجرا بفترة دايرو ده أنا بيني كبزي دي أكالي لدرينير كسع كند زجن أبزي توروار خوفا بيلو نزوم بمعسكرات تحالفون تاي أنتو وانا فرحاتهم كلهم تلكات ناي تسرح نادر دان وزي شو تسرح كاخن دي كسع كندي حيلي أو تحدد كسع كندي بمدخلنا شروع ولا حموش دوتهم نزيغا خطيب تبدأ مغنياتو اللي صفحات ناي تسرح سلازر داكا تتقبر عن الوقت قبل من سياتنا سلازر داكا تسرح تقدر حجي متى قلتي فلي تردو يتبلني خا حجي حانت بزي عقنا أنا تسرح زي في العيب ذات صندو الدعور زي تردى أكا خد حتى تكون هاي تردى أن مو بزي صندو خيدي يقولون إلكا مزرعبه والسلائي خد تسرع ذلها إذا حجي نتصور لايني ونياتو صندو ديريو شكلتن عشكلتن نطمع شكلتون عشكلتون تسرع نوان إذا صندو زحمي موضر ونياتو السلام سلان بلدنا سلام ديريو أبز خوابي أو كن
أي وقع أي سلام جرم حزوز دلي حيلة تصوم مس متصل على عينه حجي كنا سرعنا دلو كل عنا عين دانا جر تصوم دم زي ترداك أركب زعينة مدرخات مسيحة حتى نتاعي ما يرداني وزولو خمي جرنا مزيم سرح كمي جرنا نعملو رقم تقدم دور ما تقول ناخذ زيتات كله نمر بتفاتي دحر بس زين أنا كل تدمقرنا بدأ فلتان إيش نزارة دحر كم يقول أنا سمعك ويتنات كاس كفلاتات ونيك على سبس كفلات مقام مسترد أكا سون حجز كوي كنت بتاعي أول سرح كم زلمات معنا منيات هذا نجيبنا كان عخاون حجز كوي كذي كن كي ترى أكا سون تاي مقام قيمون سون هون ديون سون قدام تي سون خمس جبريل كان زارك بلها እቶም ጸላእትና ዝብልዎ ስለትደግም ዘለኻ ናይ ጸላኢ መሳርሕኻ ትኸውን እንጂ ኣብዚ ክንክንካ ኣለና ንዕብደይ ትረዳእካ ስቕኢኻ ትብል ኣብ ከምዚ ቦታታት መፂኻ ኻ ትሓትት ኣብቲ ድምልከቶም ኣካል ጌድካ ትሓትት ተነፅሮ ሽዑ ፈፂምካ ኣነ ኣይኣምነሉን እዚ ክፈርስ ኣለዎ ኢልካ ድሕር መርገፅ ወሲድካ ከመርገፅካ እዩ ግድን ኣብዚ እቶ ይንብለካ ግን نحن صحن تعيديك كي تردو سد مسارحة نيتسالا أخي خو بجيجا خير الدولة تسودو توروان بنا ويحق لي سواء عطو نيسلام بسرحكم كان بسرحي أنا مس تقارو راحو كله بجيجا ترديو miscalculation كيدو نتسودو بجيجا خير الدولة صلاتنا كم دخمت جريو كم فرحة جريو أجد أصلاً تبدأتي زوا زي أوصل عليه. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. مو قال أنتو زلوا. بس زلوا.
اليوم كما قلت خمية بتكون أشجيرات من هذا الناس أنا دوما أشجيرهم من هذا الأسرة كده
أنا أي
ولا لبنا ولا تصدق وعاد كان ما يبزح طيب ما يبزح بتشاق كيف لك ما يبزح بيكاسي كاو حتى مر دقيقة له صار فتوصل هذا اللي إنه عاد هذا
يعني ما كان صبوط طوالي عفوا يصبوا كيرجلي سوا خلاص ما بنعمل كلهم خلاص وانا كلهم بتعب بتنزلهم كنسوا صحيح مرة صبوط ما فيه هذا جبل ما أبي إلا بكا هذه ما هذا سنة متى بقربها إيه كان متى هالسبب كتبرع تسدد مالتي وكيف نحن أزيده ولا دلنا لما حالات وقفنا مالتي وسلم كاتو إلناسي وصحت ممكن أصيلا كان بدنا مالتي لذا سي أزيا معنا أنا قد يابو تعم تصبح بكا هذا نفكر كاستغنو وصفنا سي يعني حتى يوا الجربات سواء غير مكتبه ولا تغيير مكتبه واحد يخافش وصفنا سي تاخذ دليسي زي ذو على سوق عندي بتاع صباعات ويدور وري بزار بس بكان عمي عم تشوفها يسوي تكارو كمان بيسي كيف كمان بس بسبب زار وانشي يمكن كمان تيجي أرتي صبغ يرسم عسل بنوكو أسرع وسيلة بريكسي سيكون المير ما تزروس وتسكي زي هنا تدلو من سيكون أو تهدر دلسي تقاصد هم تقول لك سياسة بالمالك زي سلطنا خير إتيسي تقاصي أبدا تقاصد فيك أسمى نسي إفراسي لمن تايدي كالسلو سلم تايو دليت على نالي نعمل سيادية فقلت على السنسوات وكفل أدن خفف الجلسي كله دليت على نالي جن عدلنا خفوني دي مريج أنا نأخذ لنا فينا قليل يكون بتقوينات زخفل كلمة تاي خلق أمراتي أكثر من قبيلاتي كل ساعة زخفل كاتي أكثر من قبيلاتي جوا بروا سنة سلام اللي يبغى صلاح جوا بروا عارفونا أخافل لي تو يا هذا الكلام كم يعتمدنا زي مريج أنا إذا نأخذ لنا تكون خف مال مهنياته سمعت برويس لذا خدنا عدد دي دمنا مال بركل ساعة سمعت واحد قليل يكون أكثر كثير أدم أنا ذكرت مكتشف مالتي أساسي وأنا بلورا الزيادي اللي يعني أخذنا فرق مالتي فعلا أكيد أنا كنت أصلا قال مالتي ففي بعض الناس 5 جوعات الناس الناس توقعنا أكيد أنا كنت أصلا قال أكثر زيادي أحجي نص وزي ناس بزنا هذا فأنا فرق ما دي أكيد لنا أنت عسرت ثلاثة أتعسف تعريف الاقتصادي مالتي أنا أتعسف بس مثلا سلمنا وهم يدلو كندلو نوحي شتيش تكون البدلو نوح حبش يزبدلو هجي بس أنا هنا هجي بس حبسنا مالتي أنا مثلا السيد أنا سيج عندنا بدني شغال مالس مرة تفهمني مالت هجي ولا أمي ومسمع يعني بينا تلميسهم خصوصهم جلسي أصل دام جيس لازم أقول أنت قلت تسميها مثلا لما أجل بدل قلت تسميها مالك لذا أنت سنين حبس البليان أبينا صفقة الحجي تحريني سوساك من تنستلت أهبنا دم عسد أنا تحسب حاجة مالك عسد خطة قلت الروح ولا تعجب منهم مالك بس لا تحري وقت جدي فأبي قام بس السلام هو زقاني هو أبو بالقامل أبو جزيز خاص لما نسي كل شيء نسي حجزي أنا كأن كل جزء حتى حمر مثل صفقات مفرمة للناس جوا بلوه نشلا سمو مع له أصلا لنا كنيرنا أمامنا نقبل الله تعالى من كجوي الإنسان نقبل كرادان مالك إجازي الذي تذكرنا أو إذا كنا كنا تبرسي سبورتور لو تذكر من سياتنا لفيو حقو تبغ لتردو من سيتلو حتى تبغ مكانه أتذكر من بعد أتي أقول لك كلنا ويجي ما وصلت لنا كم تسعة سنوات سب بدأت تتابع سنة قديمة وفتح من سنفو أسرعت التي قبل جرت التي قبل فردا ولا حتى كان جيدا فتشين بس هي كردا حتى يقول ما نفعلها فرجيت على حكي بها بالتملسكي أي كردا أن أنت كذي تملس موت على الشعوب وترجين مسكت على سكير وتفرقة تسرع حلها ما لشوا عزوم هم لنا فدي أحد زربات حيش نوي ما تنجز زد تجيرو ولس أتها جراويان لأنه نزوت إيه مثلا حتى سنايفر ولس أتها جراويان تويلو ما أنا كلام خليجان تيجي مسوات نسمعه عشان كده خدنا مسوات قليل يحكوا المتجس بقول بقولي بجنزر جيب بجزيري كل المتجس سبب عين مساجد هو إنسان هجسي كم سفر وكل هذا يعني ورواق تنا السلام من مسوط وين مسوق صبوا بري السلام كم مسوسي صبوا بري لازم تقبلي هذا لها هذه بنتي اللي تتسكن كنتي زي نوع من السياسة لو قاصدين تقولوا وقت سبوا كتغني سكرت كان ذلك هيداني نتقاسون سلمتي قال صلحوا سلمتي زي قال صلحوا سلمتي كني مسوا خفل عليه كان حسيبكم كبير فما تنسى أنا كاتشين جاك سكرت أكو قريب هجي سكتنا يكون فرقة أنا طاح يكون نتقاسون جرتوي كل جرتوي هيداني معلوم تسبب فتح بنفس الطرق بنفس الطرق بسون رتو أعزقنا له ولا خطرتهم كذلك نفسي لا أنا ما تيجي بسنة قالوا مالتي يوم تردون كذي على التي كمان سمحت لكم من لصق بقول سنة بعد بس أم غدر أصل كبردون لو نيتشنتو ما قدر أنا صبرت بتقولي لهم كان بجمع ولا قدر ما تسمع مالتي أتكلم سبيت أجازة كنا كيدا بس أمشي أنا سامع زيك المسألة كم سنة سامع زيك ساكرام كيدا أنت يوم مصدوم ولا ذكر تاكل بتعمل زغير ما كان ورس كان حق بدهم دليلهم أيقون اللي هو حقيقي ما حق بدهم أيقون طيب أنا إذا صيفها تكل قريبك أنا ما يزي ما كان سلزلهم أنا ما سلزلهم من فوق سبحان الله أزي ترى هم بروك لهم ما من سيدنا وقت ما كمان كنت يقول صوت خفيف لوسي زاد ما كمان كنت يقول صوت خفيف لو كنت يقول صوت خفيف لوسي كنا نقول زبون بوسي سلام تايم كوكوينو سلام تيلو قراب تلاتومو يسوي من أنا وقت كل هذا اللون نابو مقولات زاد المحنيات يبلغ كل بس هذا مثل وكل محنيات يبلغ محنيات اللي هنا أكلنا مريض ليلة الليل مريض نحن كلام كل الأمر زاد ننسى بس حد يقول صوت خفيف لو مالس لازم أتصدق كم فلتور لك اليوم أرز زبون قالوا سكيتهم سلك هذا حدثي نزي سندسي هذا اللغات رديهم مو هم يرفع واسي يرفع وسندعي دايما مصروف على مثلا سيدة نتي انتي مصروف انتي شدر انتي محل حدا انتي قلت مثلا سجلت مساي ما انت سيدة المسادي نفس الوقت ما انت سيسكم يلا لحسن أكم زعل إنه يقول لها مرة عشان يكون سيدة لا حتسي إذا عباس ما يشوف ما فايلة قولوني لا قولوا ستايل غير من داخل التنظير الموجود زجروا فايدر ولا كيف حدو بالمو نفس الدسي نقطة عن بريد ولا حتى لا يفهم كيدا بس أنا بقولسي عندنا يا ولا كيد وشل زنقرا وكاتور تيجي مفصل زي كده عن هذا لازم أنا حسب لازم أنا حسب كيدا أنا يصير إقرأ كيدا لازم من دس من ساوي إقرأ كيدا ترجع أن نعلق مسلو كمان حسب ما جبتي صبوا وما غير زيم تاجم زنبرة نسي وما جاك هذا خلقا سلام تمطو بكان إحنا نقاد نتحدد متى دواي ولا عرايد متى مش إحنا راه متى تجمع لهم أنا هم قبل جليس لتسي نفس القط نفس ذا صمت تاسي وكا مسوأتي زغفل سلامي وكا بكوفي كاديسكت يكا ترانا دي هتخفل كان سلام كل شيء سلام سلسلة نسي لمن تاينا نفسي هذا سبب لو في تقدر وكانوا سبب لو زلوسي ذكرني بتاعهم برضي إخواني تقول مالك أنت هنا دين وصحة علامات زلوا مالك إذا حدا في ذكر جنزب يقولوا هاني أكيد حتى في مثال اللي جاي جنزب سكانوا لو مالك إحنا دين بعين جنزب يروجينا كفتنا ويكون المخدم من جنسي بعين جنزب يكون المخدم يعني بعين كفتي لو قام فتلون لنا إلى البيت الطويل مني قال حتى لا تقولون أنا قلت لهم نزيهم أنا حاسبه أنا حاسبهم كاتبين أنا نزيهم ما بين فوق أنا هذا شيء إفراوي السقم تيجي أحيو سيد مثل بري تطلع يكون يفرو زر كله إذا حكي أنا سي يفرو سي جبنا أيوة كل يوم سي أمور كل صنع سلسلة أنا سي صغيرهم من تشوف ناس يوم سنة ورنا كل يوم كنت أنا في بلاد اللي يريد فرس حوي سوق الله تطلع حتى السبب وكل ذي ترى بدهم كل الصعود أستمر على السوشيال ميديا كلهم جزء خفيفهم جدا جزء عزمسي جزء عوضهم كل ما تسيا ولا على رأسهم معي سنة عمرها وكلها فرسهم تفضلوا من هاي تقدر من هذه يمكن هنا مرحبا أدعوك thank you مسكنكي تبغى ملتي جمهورو سينتايو عادي الموزع ጌታቸው ረዳን ጻድቃን ዝርከቦም ናይ ህወሓት ሓለፍቲ ነበር ምስ ብልፅግና ምፅባሮም ንፅምዶ ስክታይ ይፈቅር ዶ ፅምዶ ናይ መጨረሻ ዕላማዎ ክሃርም እንታይ ግፊት ክግበር ኣለዎ እሞ ኣኸዶ ሰሜታ እንትኮንካት ኣቫንቲ Difficulty? Oh, okay, thank you. Selam güzel anlatıyor. Ya şimdi müziğin üzerinde yapılmaz bir kere daha şimdi balkonu da böyle sabah bir akşam
سلام يقولوا وكانوا فينا بتسمع كلامنا اليوم بوصلوا بيجي بتشوفوا حتى شعب بحث الزبالة دي أمامه سلام جدلي أمامه كلام جدلي كلنا جدلي نتقرأ بقول بشيء جدلي أنا سلام سيدنا جدلي ربح سيدنا قلنا ربينات أتنا ربح زي كنا نقول مزيدات يوم ربح زي كنا تجيب معلز ربح زي ما قالوا فريق تردي وسلام يبلغ كمليتات بين لايك ما كلام من بستي أشافر بالحجة عزيزة التي مكسرات ويكاتي ما سلام السلام زدلي ما تكون زدلش بسلام جيكا مسار بتاعته كله نكون زدلو دارو مالتي بالسلام نقول تجيكا كان زي كسرات كان بيسرع تقوله فجينا زي أراجل بسنا سرعة من اللي سوال ده هاي كل ما تجيبه تجي كومي لا لكن كنا بنخرج كوين وزي ما طلع من مستبين عليه بيتمشى لكن مش عارف نتسمى لنا مش عارف كنا ولا عند روح حينا مش كنا زهر أنا يكون أنا يجي سناني كم زي تاشمي وتشال زي تقرأ يكون زي مقاربة فجيت ما طلع من بسي بلا يقول له هاتي ما طلع وش تشجع ما كنا بنفتح ويبقى حنتي كارت حاسيبه بزي كنا تي أنا قد شيء بزي كوتشي معنا لكي ما كنا تطولنا jadi sesuai dengan orang. Sekarang anak anak itu, jadi kita perlu berlaku yang kamu yang perlu kalau, namanya sesuai transi kita perlu berlaku. Ada dasar negara budaya mereka budaya lalau lagi. Jadi para kalau mereka tahan di dalam negeri kamu percaya juga, vaksin itu juga. Jadi sebenarnya itu kerana anak dia, jadi nak di media. كل جزء ذهبنا تعدي كنا ستة من هذا البروجكت سنتين مثلا لا أرجو ولا كنيتينا يشتغلوا شيء انتهي من هنا بتشوي ما بشمال يفكروا وزق شمال بتجيبوا ما سن بتشمون يرو بتجيبوا لكن أيضا جملة يرو بدأوا مثلا أقدم بعاسي بتحاسين البحر شمال بيجي بتجي أرجو مستقبل عامة زقي زين بري نزل المنتهى تقول كل جزء نقرأت ولا تحت وقت تقول بارك عاملها masalah asal ada di Muslim kami tadi tidak ada kata itu yang mereka memfasilkan harga hasil sejual hantu borol itu dulu itu biasa sekarang nak bina selesai zon hospital zero tiga di luar papinat senciwan aile lagi rapana kalkulan dulu soal anak nanti pinat lebih jauh jauh betul hospital dia nama dia salam kailan jadi menambah syarat perihal hospital tentu bahkan anak masalah juga nunggu nabi dan juga nunggu bahan dulu. Abu tanah almati bercakap juga. Sehingga saya macam ini bukan musuh tapi kita nak tahu mai musuh selalu ada dasar Islam. Atau naik rumah dengan mai kita zaman dulu dalam alam dengan mai saya malu ni. Bahan cakap bahan kita juga macam merata hijau. Itu selalu terhasil kuna sama macam kita kita tu musuh nabi pun saya. لو يهم تعيران بتيهم بتجزون أي حمل زمان شو كانوا سابين أتوم يجات ما يتقلون من الفيستوس يرون من قبل ما تاهيسون هذا هم كساسي وزيتان بتيهم ذكر اللي حركوا ما قبل كمان بيتورا مفرامو دائما بيستوى تعبيرات ويبقى دائما بيستوى شاب الرباط أنا يرجعون تلاقي سفر على ويلا ويشوف دروس الأول شايف توم تعبيرات ما يتقلون عاجل حراجهم عاجل كذا اللي ما بيتقن كيس من الغل اليوم شباب زي ما قالوا يقولون kamu berhenti anak lain aku bersama kelima saja kaya dengan jadi sebab antara dia mengatur usaha wasilu menghadapi sebuah haji ambil kita nama mereka menambah mesti maka lain mengisi lancar wasi tan kubur mustahil ada menjadi bila wihaz tailai kone kamu tu tan menjadi pekonan kebiri jadi
thank you about heritage Roha to the random metaphors.
Awesome. Dan acara pilihan mendesaja. Sekifta afetron do. Wa sekifta da afetron. Sekifta ko inam si. Entai geron maslaka 20DF. Wa ge بتاع تصغير مسرح وديهم سي أخي باقيرو الحجن دعار نحنا نفهم مستسامة
كان حيلين فلتين أصل يلا وكيلهم كاتب رئيس ويقوم هذه ممكن ما ديسابا تبع ديسابا تنالوت المنبر وسيلهم حجي عقلنا يتغير المدخل توعد ديبهم بوشتي بجنزبهم بخبابيا ونتهم بجد شرح لنا فتروا نتها تغير كبتلوها يسألوا له سواء ترسم له تسجم له عم تسجم برساتهم ده ما ترسم له نصاب سميده بزبطه بجي سبونا قولوا تغير جزين زد كم زد تذري وتصلح معي زد كنا بلا نقرأتي خيط سلزلهم طيب نخون خيط له جماعة بعركين ما يندى ترى تحريت كان تحت الدورة دخل أما جرشة زي تقرأي تحك إني ما يكريو جميل عجيز الرأي زول ثم جمرتها قداي فتحي قداي ديمقراسي قداي كذا ما ندى تباله مستيحلو في تاريخنا ويانا تقيقا كايدا بزح تقاومتات نعاون كان بزح تقبالنا تكرهو خيلهم نيرا بزح سبي مقاقيم نيرا أوش تقرأي تراي دي برنس أبدك وكي ترفه نتعامي نايتقارو أدينهم ونيرا انجن تايكن زنو بعد يقولنا بيجي في نيرو بدك نايتقارو فلي أبدك بتعمي حياة نيرو يمكن سكروس الدبلوماسيا ومسرحة قلنا بالنسبة لنا بتصابونا نيرو نخرجي نكساب يجي في دقف نيرو بزحنا نكساس ما نيرو نمقوار كلت نيرو توديبو بزحنا قرات بقول نيرو إذا غير ترفه بتاج حمو يجي أما جرشن تحت لا يساوريدو مساتهم تيكا تقرأي بذكرتها أبزت صندوقات يعني رات تتخون أثناء كلام حينا إذا نيت صندوق قوزو نيو حتى نويح قوزو تبعيزو هلو حيجي كابزلو أن على خيرهم يجي كنت استبعت أنا تقرأي بينا عامل استلاقى مغينو ولا بديبلوماسيا عامل علي حواحات انتي دي افنسي تصادي غور الجميع ذولا لكن نايدك حيجا إذن داير إيكا ساتو بسرحو ذلو سرح كليلك أصدق أنا أشتغل يعني كان تمالا لسه بزلوا ما بزلوا سوا ندخل بينات كايدو زليو ليت ما حد يعرفهم ساوث ستيت ديبارتمنت زلوا سوا كارلوت وجلتها بيعرف تمسح زلوا وقت تقرأي كاوزوت جنرالات كله معلوماتهم زركبوا سبلتنا هاي بس حسر حلو تبغون نقولوا كده إذا تقرأي كريم جنبي رايج قدم معهم يزدقفني نبرتين تلي وين يرجع حواحات تبال ولا بتنتبه دنيا كاي دنيا ليه تقرأي بتنتبه حواحات تايدو نختار من نخبز العلي دنيا سؤالتنا ريفورم بعد ديمقراطية بعده كان البوليتيكال مسرحات متعرّي جلزوا أو كيدو مكان في اللامنسيات استميدهم نيرهم أجيهم نيرهم صوم أي محكم مقدرنا عن نيرهم ساتهم تقرأي تواتاتيرهم ما نيرهم تزون دروخم تعتو يزور كوستي تودو شاشة ليتن معتم زي عرفت تدوسو سولو زلو خيناتسي تحمقان تناي كينات مدلاوات ستودي محلوها قرفوتي ولا تاتي تغي تتكوسل سيت مسرح سي وردي أبدي فعناس أفتي في تفيت سماها لنا حكي مسراوي جيبها ولا تتدي في البالا وتتأميرو هل يغفد تبايلو ورد فساس توينا زاتينا مخدم تتكوسون محلو زي ما كانت تتبنان ورد تتيس تتكوس محلو يدك نعود كان يحتوي بفوس تمسرح
كنت حسب عندي حسيبه بدي كنا أول شيء كابو السوق ناتو كالكوليشن أزام ما تنسون نخ كاشام شو كل اللي ناخو على السوشيال ميديا نروقات لكن سوق نروقات بعد ويديو كلنا بعد أمس عم براي فيكس نتاعنا مركز ولا لو صار من أمس ناخو شيء بتجي حكوا يكون بدي تعلم أنا أتوقع نبرة يطلب ناخو مالك ناخو سلوك صغيرة أسمع تبدين العلم سرحتني أنا تاني سرنا وخنا ندرو في الدنيا لحد أديس أبابا عتيقة سرح مجمر كتقاطع لنا لو تغالي تنا غير علامهم زنبرة دريتهم زنبرة لتبوتا النسخ وتسخنا سراويتو نحنا حين قرنا يبايزوا يوجه زلام مسان كبابي نخطط طول ده مالتي ولا زعج مالتي زعج وتسخنا زلام مسان قالنا مش تاسموا عبيلو هذه وجه تانكتاتهم قالنا يعيزوا مال نيري زلام مسان نيري سراويت زلام مسان نيرو بس صورنا نيرو بقول وقتها نيرو من ناحية درا سراويت لأن زنبرنا بوتا نيرو أتسموا عبيلو خادم كله تايت علامات وري أنا بزيهم زارون سنة زين دلبا حسيبهم زنبورو بعد بعد كان بعد ጌታቸው ረዳ ጉጅለ ሮሃሚጃ ነቲ ሰራዊት ቋፅሮ ፈቲሎም ነይሮም ጌታቸው ረዳ ዝክሮ ትኸውኩ ሰለስተ ካብቶም ላዕሎት ሓለፍቲ ኣብዚ ሰራዊት ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ሰጉይዎም ካብ ስልጣን ሰጉይዎም ኣለኹ ዝበለሉ እዋን ዝክሮ እንዲኹም
ነቶም ምስኡ ኮይኖም ዘለዉ ኣሃዱታት ገይሩ ከሰናሓሲቡ ነይሩ
ኤግዛክትሊ ነቶም ምስኡ ዝነበሩ ኣዘዝቲ ሰራዊት ንዖም ሒዙ ነቶም እምቢ ኣይንገብርን ኢና ዝበልዎ ንዓቶም ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ኣብ መዝነትኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ኢልዎም ክገርመኩም ሽዑ ምሸት ንሳቶም ንፅባሒታ እዮም ምንቅስቃስ ገይሮም እቶም ካብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ዝበሎም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ሓዊሱ ምስ ኩሎም ታሕተወት ተኣዘዝቲ ናቶምን ኣሃዱታቶም ከይተረፈየ ኣድስኪልዎም ንሳቶም ምትሓዝ ኣበይ መንበርቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ንዓቶም ኣብ ትሕቲ ቀይዲ ዝኸትዎም እዮም ተንቀሳቀሶም ነይሮም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት እቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ነቶም ምስኦም ሕራይ ዝበሉ በዓል ወልደን ጥሩ ገለመለ ሒዝካ ነዚ ንፅባሒቱን ድሕሪ ፅባሒቱ ቀጥታ በዚ ንሓና ዶባት ውቁ ከፍቱ ይትመደብ ነይሩ ንክትፈልጥዎ ማለት እዩ ትደይ ደንግሮ ኣነ ነዞም ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም ዝፍክሩ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ሰብካ ፈሊጥዎም እንዲ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ምኳኖም ክሕቡ ይኮኑን እያ እዮም ከዓኒ ሰብካ ክከላኸለሎም ኣይክእል ሓቂ ንሱ ስለዝኾነ ደናቁር ስለዝኾኑ እምበር ሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ነቲ ሰራዊት ሒዝካ ናይ ትግራይ ማለት እዩ ያላ ኸይደ እቶ ንዛላ መሳከስ ሓዛ ክበሃል እሞ ሽዑ ቶክቶክ ክጅምር ሽዑ ፌደራልካ ረዳት ተባሂሉ መፂኡ ወሶም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ምሸት ከባቢ ንሳቶም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ኣብ ዝገበረሉ ጌታቸው ረዳ ስማዕ ኣለኹም እዞም ሎማዓንቲ ክነግረኩም እየ ተሓቂ ኣብተ እዩ ፀገም የብሉን ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ክገብር ከሎ ክሰጎም ከሎ ሒፉ ኣብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ክብሎም ከሎ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ ሰዓት 6-7 ኣቢሉ ኣነ ንባዕለይ ካብ ትግራይ ተደው ኢሉኒ እሞኒቶ እሞኑ ማለት እዩ ሰብ ኣለውሉ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ኣብ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ 7 መኻይን ዓበይቲ መኻይን 7 መኻይን ሰራዊት ኣራኪቡ በዚ ራያን ከባቢኡ ማለት እዩ ንምሸቱ ማለት እዩ ስለዘይንዛረበሉ ሰዓቱ ስለዘይኣኸረ ሲና ምስ ፀጥታ ምስ ገለ ስለዝተሓሓዝ ኢና ዘይንዛረብ እምበር ተሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ፅቡቅ ጌርና ንፈልጡ ነቲኦም ካብ ስልጣን ኣውርድ ኣቢሎም 7 ዝኾና መኻይን ኣውሪዶሞም ኣብ ግንባር ራያ ትብልዎ ከባቢ ማለት እዩ እቲኦም ክጅምሩ እሞ ቶክቶክ ከብሉ እቲኦም ካብ ሕሙስ ኢሎም ክኣትዎም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ማለት እዩ በዚ ጌርካ ነቲ ኩናት ባዕባዕቶም ብሎ እቲ ዕላማ እዚ ነይሩ ንሳቶም ዘይተፀበይዎ ግን እቲ ክከታተሎም ፀንሐ ሓይሊ ከዓኒ ንሳቶም እንታይ ጀመሩ ከሎ ብዓዲ ግራት ክፀራርጎ ጀሚሩ ማለት እዩ ምናልባሽ ነቶም ሻዕብያ መን ምዃኑ ዘይፈልጡ ማለት ከነላልዮም ንሻዕብያ ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም መንግስትና ንፈልጥ ኢና ድብሉ ደናቁር ከነላልዮም ሻዕብያ ማለት እዩ እና ከነላልዮም መንግስት ኤርትራ መን ምዃኑ ማለት እዩ ኣውዲቃትን ላምዥ ትድሕዝነኒ ኣውሪዳት እቲ ድሕዝነኒ ግን ናይዞም ደናቁር እልፊ ደንቆራርዓይ ክፍሊ ኮይኖም ክዛረቡ ከለዉ ዋላ ነቲ ድንቁርኖም ክሽፍኑ ዘይክእሉ ምዃኖም ድሕዝነኒ ማለት እዩ እልፊ ደናቁር ናይ ካብ ፍልጠት ነፃ ዝኾኑ ሰባት ዓሞም ስለ ዘይፈልጡ እዩ ዓሞም ተዝፈልጡ ነይሮም ዓሞም ሒዞም ስቕብሩ ነይሮም ግን ልዕሊ ዓሞም እዩ እዚ ንዋን ዛረቦ ዘለና ንዝመፅ ዝበለ 100 ዓመት ተመራሚሮም ኣይፈልጡ ግን
I think we got to consider the fact that the U.S. has bringing typhoid, smallpox, indigenous people. The list goes on and on. Like we could talk about Agent Orange in Vietnam, There's just a lot of unhumane tactics of war historically that the U.S. is involved in. So when we think of Israel and how close-knit they are with the U.S., biological warfare is kind of where it's at. The sad thing is the next step is just cyber, blocking out any type of visual, or, they're killing press, as we know. So just staying away from propaganda.
Your mic's a little bit muffled, but Marty, even to your point, when you look at what happened with smallpox and how it spread within the indigenous the community, they on purpose distributed
whatever. What America's doing, at the end of the day, if they want to cook it, they didn't go away and get uranium yourself and let it do it.
Yeah, but they actually said the uranium. So they're willing to negotiate uranium enrichment for civilian population use, which is fine, right? You need it for medical, you need it for power plants, and they were supposed to have up to 20 power plants, but because of a lot of other issues, they only have one.
Do you know what they want? This is what they want, and I disagree. 9/11 was never done by Muslims. Never. They never came from us. I assure you or not. We do not do that. Mm-hmm. We only go to war when we are attacked. But it's incorrect for us to go against. We have to apply ourselves to the law of the government unless it goes for ourselves.
I got the ammo, but there are some extreme Muslims.
I know. And they can be. But if you ever looked at the way the structure of 9/11 occurred, look at it. It occurred from the bottom first. So there was bombs at the bottom. Watch the video. It wasn't the helicopter. It wasn't the plane. Just watch it. People just want to believe what they want to. As a Muslim, I wouldn't believe. I'm a bloody rebel, sis. And I am a Muslim. I believe in Islam. I say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. I will stand up for my religion because my religion is a religion of peace. It is.
But she's a bloody revolution.